Good afternoon, Robert Scribbler. It is January 2nd, 2019. Happy 2019 to everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to another one of my clean energy and climate change video blogs. And for this segment, what I'm going to do is talk about why U.S. national climate policy is so important to the United States and the world from the standpoint of global security and national security. I'm going to talk about a wide range of issues that are related, that may not seem initially related, but that are interrelated. And those issues are issues like impacts related to human-caused climate change, such as this melt that we are seeing now in the major ice sheets and ice shelves across the surface of the world, the meddling by Russia in the US elections, Russia being a Petro state, a state whose economy is reliant or highly reliant on fossil fuel sales for its economic stability, and the related climate change denial by Trump and a number of Republicans, as well as the Green New Deal and why the Green New Deal and related energy and climate policy supporting clean energy in the United States is so important to our physical security as a nation. So, okay, starting out, what we're looking at here is a satellite picture of the Amory ice shelf. It's an ice shelf in a section of eastern Antarctica, which over recent years appears to have seen some increased surface melt. It's one of those issues that climate scientists probably need to dig into a little bit more to see if the Amory ice shelf itself is at risk of destabilizing. However, we do have a number of ice shelves around Antarctica that are at increasing risk of destabilization or are destabilizing right now as a result of warming, both atmospheric and ocean warming, which is moving in under the ice shelves and ice sheets and causing what they call basal melt, which is melting at the undersides and is causing a number of ice shelves to break up or to speed up, and also causing the glaciers behind the ice shelves to unlock and move into the ocean at a more rapid pace. And this is speeding up global sea level rise, which has implications for numerous cities and states and nations and islands around the world. Faster seas rise, the more rapidly such a large portion of the human population comes at risk from coastal and tidal flooding. And that is just one aspect that is driven by human-caused climate change, which is in turn driven primarily by fossil fuel burning. Now, this picture is from January 1st, 2019, and as we can see in the satellite shot, you see a lot of blue in the image here, and this blue that we are seeing is melt ponding on the Amory ice sheet. Ice shelf, and I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in a bit more, get a close-up shot at these blue areas. If you look at the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you can see a scale, and as we can see that some of these melt ponds are a mile or more in length, some possibly as long as 3 to 5 miles or more, and you can see these melt ponds in the form of bluing surface areas on the ice shelf here, as well as an overall blue tint, which is an indicator of smaller melt ponds. They're not immediately visible in this lower resolution, a satellite shot that's not quite able to resolve smaller melt ponds, but it is definitely picking up these very large melt ponds in the satellite shot. Now, we are still relatively early in the austral summer, so the southern hemisphere right now of the Earth is presently experiencing summer, and we are still relatively early, and so this melt ponding that we are seeing over the Amory ice shelf is likely to continue to expand over the coming weeks, and it's something that we're going to keep an eye on. Now, this is just an indicator, one indicator of many of the impacts of human-caused climate change, increased surface melt on major land ice sheets, but there are a number of other impacts that we are starting to see now that include more extreme weather events, very likely signal in an increasing prevalence of more extreme hurricanes, more extreme rainfall events, more severe droughts, more severe wildfires in a number of locations, increasing impacts to ocean health, increasing harms to ocean health, such as coral bleaching that is spurred both by warming ocean temperatures as well as ocean acidification, which is driven by increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere transferring into the oceans, and a broad impact overall to ocean health as melt from ice sheets also puts at risk an essential ocean overturning circulation, which is driven in the high latitude regions by the polar zones and the stability of ice sheets. And if these ice sheets destabilize, has a risk of shutting down, maybe not completely shutting down, but really ramping back ocean overturning circulation, which is a major drive, which is a process that is very essential to ocean health, as well as a process that maintains the present weather stability around the globe. So a number of issues at risk due to a warming climate, which is driven by fossil fuel burning. So in order to respond to climate change, the low-hanging fruit response involves rapidly transitioning away from fossil fuel burning and doing things like supporting clean energy vehicle transportation, as well as clean energy generation, be it through wind and solar and electric vehicles and other clean energy sources, and using these sources to replace the primary driver for human-caused climate change, which is fossil fuel burning. And at this point, fossil fuel burning contributes approximately 37 billion tons of carbon dioxide to the Earth's atmosphere every year now, which is an extraordinary pulse of carbon, something that is likely unprecedented in the geological record. And what that means is that human emissions are driving a warming event at a speed that has likely not been seen before in the entire geological record of Earth history, and certainly not within the past 65 million years. So what is happening right now is a very serious event, and one that is driven by harmful energy use. So transitioning to clean energy helps to deal with the climate crisis by lessening the force of the impact, by reducing those carbon emissions and eventually getting those carbon emissions to zero. Now, one of the things that I would like to talk about in this video blog is the fact that clean energy initiatives are also a national security issue with regards to our position vis-a-vis bad actor states. Many of these bad actor states are also petro states that are dependent on fossil fuels for their economic, political, and military might. So if the U.S. is less dependent on fossil fuels, then the U.S. is also not sending money to places like, Russia or other locations around the world, which may have a kind of a high level of animosity to the U.S. and produces aggressive policies and aggressive postures to the U.S. that hurt our own security. And recently, Russia interfered in the U.S. election 2016 in order to try and force the election of Donald Trump, and it appears that the Russian interference campaign there's a lot of evidence that the Russian interference campaign occurred, and it's pretty unequivocal at this point. And also, there's mounting evidence that Russia's influence was very high and probably tipped the scales in order to elect Donald Trump, who is, one, a climate change denier and also supports policies that increase rather than reduce fossil fuel burning. So a political ally, essentially, of Russia in the form of Donald Trump, at the very least in the form of his anti-clean energy policies, anti-environmental policies, which would benefit Russia by proxy through producing more demand for oil and gas, both in the US and around the world. Now, it's worth noting that the economy of Russia itself, so with regards to incentives for Russia to harmfully interfere in U.S. politics, the Russian economy is, as far as GDP goes, 16% of Russia's GDP in total is provided by fossil fuels. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but it is a massive amount. It's very, very seldom that any single sector in any single stable economy accounts for more than 10% of GDP. So for oil and gas to account for 16% of GDP in Russia is a very high number. Moreover, 52% of the federal budget in Russia comes from fossil fuel revenues. So if Russia is building nuclear weapons or nuclear bombers or building up its armed forces, which have lately been very aggressive on the world stage, 52% of the money that goes to that comes from fossil fuel dollars. So if the price of oil is high, if there's a high demand for oil, if there's a high demand for gas, it actually enables Russia to be a more aggressive actor on the world stage and to generate more instability by doing things like invading the Ukraine or Georgia, or more recently sending nuclear-capable bombers to Venezuela, which caused a big fuss among NATO and the U.S. Because it appears that Russia is expanding its nuclear posture to the Western Hemisphere in a way that appears threatening to the U.S. and its allies. Now, a third point with regards to Russia's dependence on oil and gas is kind of a rather harmful dependence, is that 70% of Russia's total exports also come from the oil and gas sector. So a country that is very dependent on fossil fuels and has also geopolitically been a very bad actor over recent years. Now, I'd also just like to state that Russia has its own climate doctrine. It tends to waver back and forth, but in the past, Russia has stated that climate change is beneficial to Russia, and this is probably not true. It's probably more true that climate change is harmful to Russia because it moves rainfall patterns away from highly productive growing regions, areas with deep soil formations, and moves rainfall into the rockier, more northerly formations. It also, climate change tends to destabilize states to the south of Russia, which would tend to generate instability on Russia's southern border. And that's not something any nation wants, is destabilize states on their southern border. And in addition, sea level rise, the northern parts of Russia are very vulnerable to sea level rise. And if in the worst case scenarios, when it comes to sea level rise, northern sections of Russia lose a lot of land mass due to rising oceans. So many numerous impacts, negative impacts from climate change to Russia, also including an amplification of very powerful wildfires in the northern region running through both productive farmland and productive forest areas. So despite past statements by Russia, climate change is not helpful to Russia, but in the past, some Russian government statements have indicated that they view climate change as a benefit to them. So their policy-oriented structure is very heavily invested in fossil fuels and fossil fuel burning, with very little in the way of clean energy policy to speak of, despite the fact that at times Russia has provided some lukewarm support, verbal support for global climate policies, but practically zero practical or actual support. Now, we did talk about Trump and why Trump is kind of a natural ally of Russia. There's many other reasons why Trump might be a natural ally of Russia, but from the policy standpoint, from the perspective of energy and climate, Trump has a stated disbelief in human-caused climate change, which is both anti-factual, but also supports policies that would benefit Russia, such as attacks on U.S. clean energy policies, such as corporate fuel efficiency standards, or electric vehicle tax credits, or incentives for wind and solar energy, or other clean energy and energy independence, U.S. energy independence, or independence from fossil fuel related programs, attacking the Paris Climate Agreement, attacking Obama's Clean Power Plan. All these things would tend to benefit a petrostate like Russia. Now, in addition to Trump, we also have an issue where a large portion of the Republican Party has been legislatively captured by fossil fuel special interests. And the issue of legislative capture or capture by powerful lobbying groups is an issue throughout Congress. But in particular, the Republican Party is full of individuals who tend to be against positive climate policies and positive environmental policies. And yet another reason for Russia to support Trump and the Republican Party, because the policy stance of the Republican Party has tended to be more pro-fossil fuel than that of the Democratic Party. So how does this affect us geopolitically? How does it hurt our security as Americans, not just from a climate standpoint, even though climate change is very harmful to the security of everyone living around the world right now, but also from a geopolitical standpoint, from a direct standpoint. So the more money that goes to Russia, the more able they are to do things like send nuclear-capable bombers to Venezuela or to support proxy states. And it does appear, according to recent reporting in the Washington Post, that Venezuela is steadily becoming a proxy state of Russia. Russia has invested heavily in Venezuela. Apparently, Rosneft, which is a Russian-linked international oil company, has an approximate 50% lien on Citgo, which is a Venezuelan sponsored international oil company. And Russia is increasingly funding Venezuelan government debt. And apparently in exchange for this, Russia is getting access to Venezuelan airstrips and moving physical military forces into a more threatening posture to the U.S. and the Caribbean and various U.S. allies. This ability of Russia to project its power directly related to its fossil fuel revenues. So in this nexus, we see an impact to U.S. security, an impact to Russia's ability to threaten U.S. security, and an impact to the global climate system, all coming from pro-fossil fuel policy. And a lot of times it's really difficult to look at all these links in context, and many people shy away from it because it's complex, but there are a lot of relationships between fossil fuel burning and these harmful global power interactions. And in my opinion, it's really important to shine a light on that, because not only are we going to need to deal with climate change coming forward, but as climate change impacts grow, the chances for growing instability increase, and the chances for these bad actors to make these kinds of power plays also increases. So there is a relationship between energy policy and global and national security. And the more we fund clean energy, the more secure we tend to be as a nation. So moving on to that, I'd just like to talk about something that has come up a lot in the media now that Democrats are returning to power. And it's this issue of a Green New Deal. Now, a Green New Deal is a broad umbrella term for multiple policies that support clean energy and climate change response and energy efficiency, as well as income inequality in the U.S. In my opinion, this policy umbrella is a very positive policy movement that's supported by progressives within the Democratic Party because it's a groundbreaking policy. It's likely to receive a lot of resistance from traditional players, but I think it's very important that those of us who are progressive continue to talk about the Green New Deal. And in my opinion, the Green New Deal would also be a great benefit to U.S. national security by, one, providing a more swift avenue for U.S. energy independence, but also removing economic power from bad actors like Russia, because oil itself is a fungible asset. Any reduced demand in oil or gas has a ripple effect on these economies that are based on petroleum, like Russia. And if you undercut Russia's economic power, then they're less able to threaten us either by interfering with our elections or by moving nuclear-capable weapon systems into the Western Hemisphere. And so I think that as progressives, we often don't really talk about the national security aspect of the policies we support, but I think it's very important as a former member of the military to speak to the issue of national security, because climate change response is also a positive response for national security. It makes us all more secure, both vis-a-vis the bad actors globally and vis-a-vis the rising climate crisis. It gives us more space to respond, it gives us more flexibility, and it makes us stronger as a nation overall. So I'm going to go ahead and end on this point and just note that supporting clean, green power at home also supports a more powerful, a more benevolent, a more moral United States, and a safer United States, as well as a safer world. And we should all support that. I'm going to go ahead and plug a blog, a related blog that I've written over on robertscribbler.com. I'm going to go ahead and provide the link. The blog itself goes more into depth on a number of these issues that I touched on in this video blog. I know I got a bit wonky here, so I hope you did enjoy this particular segment, but I think it's very important to talk about the interrelatedness of our policy stances with the consequences of good policy decisions, the positive consequences of good policy decisions, and the negative consequences of bad policy decisions. And unfortunately, the present presidential leadership and the present Republican Party is supporting policy decisions that result in more harm for the U.S. in the short, medium, and long term vis-a-vis our enemies, our adversaries on the world stage, and vis-a-vis growing impacts from the direct impacts of human-caused climate change. So thank you for joining me, and I'll be chatting with you soon.